The rain lashed sideways across the churchyard, soaking silk and wool alike, as the Duke of Bowmont stood over the grave of a girl who had been dead for 6 years. The elm coffin was dragged from the earth. The lid split under the crowbar's pressure. Inside, white silk, blackened roses. No body. The coffin is empty, Pharaoh said hoarsely behind him. Roden Voss did not move. He did not speak. He had not wept the day they buried her. He had not raised his voice since. But now, beneath the hammering rain, his hands began to shake. Not with grief, with rage. 6 years earlier, she had stood in the far corner of Almac's assembly rooms as if she did not belong there, and did not care that she did not. Petronella Ashcraftoft, 18, newly orphaned, wearing her mother's plain white muslin while the daughters of London glittered in diamonds and silk. No one asked her to dance. Her aunt, Mrs. Moira Hadwell, positioned her carefully, always in shadow, always just out of reach of introductions. She is shy, Mrs. Hadwell would murmur sweetly. She lacks the temperament for society. It was a lie. Nell lacked nothing except permission to be seen. Roden Voss had noticed her within minutes of entering the ballroom. He did not notice beauty first, he noticed stillness. 300 people performed. Smiles, laughter, carefully calculated flirtations. She did not perform. She stood straight-backed beside a pillar wrapped in ivy and observed the room as if she were cataloging it. When a crystal vase tipped beside her, she caught it with quick, competent hands and stepped directly into his path. Their fingers brushed. "Forgive me," she said calmly. "The stems are weak. They have been overwatered." He had almost laughed. "Who discusses rose stems during a waltz?" "You know about roses," he said. "My father grew them," she answered. A flicker crossed her face. Grief, recent and sharp. He would have been appalled by this arrangement. He had never forgotten that look, the intelligence behind it, the refusal to shrink. Then her aunt appeared. Petronella, not Nell. Petronella, sharp, corrective, final. And she was gone. He wrote to her the next morning. Permission to call. She was unwell. He wrote again. She had returned to Devonshire. A third time, her health was fragile, further correspondence unwelcome. 3 weeks later, the announcement appeared in the Morning Post. Miss Petronella Ashcraftoft died of a sudden fever, aged 19. He attended the funeral in silence. He stood at the back of the church. He watched the coffin lowered. He felt something inside him seal shut. He had known her for 30 seconds. It was enough. He kept her blank dance card from that night in Almack's, every line empty. He carried it over his heart for 6 years. And now, the coffin was empty. Rain slid down his face, indistinguishable from anything else. "She was never here," Pharaoh whispered. Roden's voice, when it came, was quiet. Deadly quiet. "Briarstone Asylum," he said. Because Pharaoh had brought him the rumor 3 weeks earlier. A woman in Yorkshire, admitted 3 days after the funeral. Mary Poole, age 19. Claims to be someone else. Restrict correspondence. Committed by Mrs. M. Hadwell. The Duke turned from the grave without another word. They rode through the night. Briarstone stood like a respectable lie. Grey stone, iron gates, narrow windows. He demanded the register. March 25th, 1842. Mary Poole, admitted by aunt. Diagnosis, hysteria, delusions of identity. Take me to her. The corridor smelled of carbolic and damp stone. Doors lined either side. Some silent, some not. The matron hesitated before the final key. "She is quiet now," she said, "very compliant." The Duke did not answer. The door opened. A small room, iron-barred window, narrow cot, and a woman seated on its edge. Thin, pale, hands folded, eyes fixed on the wall. She did not look up. She had learned not to. He stepped inside. "Nell." The sound of her name in that room was like glass breaking. Her head turned slowly. Dark eyes, older than they should have been, met his. "You know my name," she whispered. He swallowed. "I know who you are." She stood unsteadily. "They told me I was not," she said, "for 6 years." His composure fractured. "I opened your grave," he said. "You were never in it." Silence. Then very softly, "I told them," she breathed. "Every day. My name is Petronella Ashcraftoft." He stepped forward. "I'm taking you out of here." The matron began to protest. He turned to her. "Tell me," he said, his voice so controlled it chilled the air. "Who ordered this?" Outside, the iron gates creaked open. For the first time in 6 years, Nell Ashcraftoft stepped into open air, and Roden Voss understood something with terrifying clarity. He had not come to rescue an inheritance. He had come to reclaim the only woman he had ever chosen. and he was about to start a war with the woman who buried her alive. London did not yet know she was alive. That was deliberate. The Duke did not take her to Bowmont House in Mayfair. He took her south instead, to Hampshire, to the wide-open grounds of Beaumont Park, where no gossiping dowager could peer through carriage curtains and whisper that the marble Duke had brought home a madwoman. He gave her space. That, more than anything, unsettled her. Her suite in the east wing overlooked the lake. The windows were unbarred, the locks removed, the curtains light enough to move with the wind. "Nothing here will be closed against you," Mrs. Treadwell told her gently. Nell touched the window frame as if testing the truth of it. The first night she did not sleep in the bed. She slept on the floor beside it, back against the wall facing the door. Old habits. The Duke did not visit. He sent broth, fresh bread, a note. "If you require anything, I am in the library. If you require nothing, that is perfectly acceptable. Hervey." No pressure, no expectation. She did not answer. On the third morning, she walked into the gardens alone. The frost silvered the lawns. Bare rose stems reached upward like skeletal hands. She stopped at them. "They used roses," she said without turning. He had followed at a distance. "I know. They pressed them into silk. My father's damasks, pink in June. They were black when you opened it, were they not?" He did not ask how she knew. "Yes." She inhaled slowly. "I will not let her keep them," she said. "When they bloom again, they will belong to me." There was no trembling in her voice. He felt something shift inside him. Not pity. Recognition. Society, however, did not wait patiently. Rumors had already begun to ripple through London drawing rooms. The Duke of Bowmont had exhumed a grave. The Duke of Bowmont had ridden north in a storm. The Duke of Bowmont had withdrawn from 3 political dinners in 1 week. Lord Ashton arrived at Beaumont Park unannounced on the 7th day. He found Roden in the study. "It is all over St. James's," Ashton said quietly. "They say you have lost your senses, that you are keeping a hysterical girl hidden in Hampshire." Roden did not look up from the documents spread before him. "Do they?" "Roden." Ashton lowered his voice. "If this is true, if she is alive, this becomes scandal of the highest order. Her aunt has allies, solicitors, parliament connections. You will not fight this quietly." "I do not intend to." Ashton studied him. "You have always despised spectacle." "Yes." "And yet you are preparing one." Roden's pen paused. "Yes." Nell heard the word scandal before she heard her own name. 2 maids in the corridor. "Duke dug her up, they say. Improper, bringing her here unmarried. If she is unstable." The word unstable struck like a physical blow. She stepped into the corridor. They froze. "Finish the sentence," she said calmly. Neither did. She held their gaze until they lowered it. "I am not unstable," she said evenly. "I was imprisoned." She turned and walked away before her hands could begin to shake. In her room, she pressed her palms against the windowsill until the tremor passed. 6 years of being told her reality was delusion did not dissolve in 7 days of fresh air. It lingered, in whispers, in doubt, in the way she sometimes wondered if this house might vanish when she blinked. That evening, she went to the library. He rose halfway when she entered, then stopped himself. She noticed. "You always stand," she said. "I do not wish to loom." "You are very tall. Looming is inevitable." A faint flicker of humor touched his expression. She crossed the room and placed something on his desk. A ledger. "You are being cheated," she said. He blinked. "By whom?" "Your steward. Candle expenditure inflated by 12 pounds a quarter." He stared at her. "You have been auditing my household accounts?" I needed to remember who I was. Silence. Then, very quietly, "And who are you?" She met his eyes. "Petronella Ashcraftoft, daughter of Sir Gerard, not hysterical, not delusional, not merry." He nodded once, as I said. Something fragile steadied between them. Trust, perhaps, or the beginning of it. But in London, Mrs. Moira Hadwell had also begun to hear rumors, not whispers. Names: Briarstone, exhumation, Beaumont. She sent 3 urgent letters. None were answered. For the first time in 7 years, she began to feel something she did not like. Uncertainty. And when uncertainty entered the mind of a woman who had buried her niece alive, it did not remain idle. The invitation arrived at Harrowfield on cream vellum edged in gold. Mrs. Moira Hadwell read it twice. Then a third time. "The Duke of Bowmont requests the pleasure of your company at a ball to be held at Beaumont House, Mayfair, on the evening of November the 28th. No explanation, no mention of Nell, no accusation, just an invitation. Arthur paled. You will not go, he muttered. It is a trap. Mrs. Hadwell folded the card carefully. It is a duke, she said coolly. One does not decline a duke. But that night, for the first time in years, she did not sleep well. At Beaumont Park, Nell stood before the long mirror in her chamber, examining her reflection as if she did not entirely trust it. Color had returned to her cheeks, strength to her frame. Yet sometimes when she stared long enough, she still saw the gray dress, the narrow cot, the barred window. You are not there, she whispered to the glass. A knock. May I enter? Roden's voice. Yes. He stepped inside but remained near the door. Always near the door, never blocking it. There is something you should know, he said. She braced instinctively. Your aunt has accepted my invitation. The air shifted. She will come? Nell asked. Yes. To London. Yes. Nell's pulse quickened, not fear exactly. Something sharper. Anticipation. She believes this is a social call, he continued. She does not yet understand that I intend to present evidence. You are certain? Nell asked quietly. In front of all of them? Yes. He did not hesitate. Your reputation. I care nothing for reputation. She studied him. You have always cared. His jaw tightened. I cared when I thought you were buried in that ground. I cared when silence was my only option. I do not care now. There was steel in his voice. But beneath it, fury. Word of the upcoming ball spread rapidly through London society. Beaumont had been reclusive for years. Now he was hosting an event of dazzling scale. 600 candles ordered. White roses, deliberately. The irony was not lost on Nell when she learned of it. You wish to use roses? She asked. Yes. They use them to bury me. I intend to use them to unbury you. She held his gaze. For a moment she forgot to breathe. Yet as preparations intensified, so did whispers. Lord Alderton called again, this time properly received. He bowed over Nell's hand. My dear Miss Ashcraftoft, he said smoothly, London will devour this story. You must be careful. She withdrew her hand calmly. I survived something far more dangerous than London. He glanced toward the Duke. Indeed. Roden's stare did not waver. Alderton smiled thinly and departed. When the door closed, Nell exhaled. They will say you rescued me for my fortune, she said. They already do. And does that trouble you? No. It troubles me. That surprised him. She turned toward the window. For 6 years I was told my mind was false. That every certainty I held was delusion. Now I am free, and still the world questions what is real. He crossed the room slowly, stopped an arm's length away. Then let them question me instead, he said quietly. Not you. She looked at him. The marble Duke, feared, impenetrable, and yet standing there as if the only thing that mattered was whether she trembled. You cannot fight every whisper, she said. No, he replied, but I can choose which ones deserve destruction. In Devonshire, Mrs. Hadwell burned letters. In London, solicitors prepared warrants. In Hampshire, Nell pressed her fingers to the piano keys and tried to steady her breathing. And Roden Voss began arranging the most devastating ballroom in England. Because part 3 of this story was not about grief, it was about exposure. And when secrets rot long enough, they do not collapse quietly. The first crack did not come in a ballroom. It came in the dark. 3 nights before the ball, Nell woke gasping. The room was silent, the window open, the lake beyond it silvered by moonlight. Still, her heart pounded as if leather straps bound her wrists. She had been dreaming of keys. Not the soft domestic jangle of Beaumont Park, but iron keys scraping against stone corridors. She sat upright in bed, breath shallow. The door was closed. Closed. She rose and crossed the room quickly, pulling it open with more force than necessary. Air moved through the corridor. No lock. No bolt. No restraint. Yet her pulse would not slow. A shadow shifted at the end of the hall. She stiffened. Your Grace? Mrs. Treadwell's voice, gentle and alert. Nell swallowed. I am not ill, she said immediately. I did not assume you were. The older woman stepped closer but did not touch her. You may leave doors open here, she said quietly. Or sit by the fire. Or wake the Duke if you wish. Nell's spine straightened. I will not wake him. Mrs. Treadwell studied her face for a long moment. You need not endure alone simply because you once had to. The words lingered long after the housekeeper retreated. Roden found her at dawn. She was seated at the pianoforte, not playing, just resting her fingertips lightly against the keys as if reminding herself they were real. You did not sleep, he observed. She did not ask how he knew. Neither did you. He allowed that with a small nod. Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable but charged. "Are you afraid of the ball?" he asked at last. She considered. "No," she said honestly. "I am afraid of what happens after." He leaned one shoulder against the doorframe. "They will stare. They stared before. They will speculate. They speculated before." He exhaled. "They will question whether you're stable." There it was. The word. She turned slowly to face him. "Do you?" she asked. The question was quiet, not accusatory, but it struck harder than any shout. His jaw tightened, not in anger but in something closer to pain. "No." She held his gaze. "Not even when I wake in the night? Not even when I cannot bear a closed door?" "No." "Not even when I audit your candles at midnight?" A flicker, almost a smile. "Especially then?" Something in her shoulders eased, but only slightly. "You did not answer it once," she said. He did not evade it. "I did not answer it once because I despise the word," he said. "And I wish to choose mine carefully." She watched him. "I have spent my life being certain," he continued. "Certain of contracts, of estates, of politics. But I have learned that certainty can become cruelty if it refuses to listen." He stepped fully into the room now. "You survived 6 years of calculated erasure. If you tremble at doors, it is because someone taught your body to fear them. That is not madness. That is memory." The words landed softly, but they landed. She looked away quickly, blinking. "No tears, not yet. I will stand beside you at the ball," he said. "But if at any moment you wish to leave, we leave." "And the spectacle?" she asked. "To hell with spectacle." That startled a small laugh from her, brief, startled, real. It changed his expression entirely. He had seen her composed. He had seen her haunted. He had seen her furious. But laughter, that was new. He stepped closer without thinking, close enough that he could see the faint scar on her wrist where the restraints had once bitten into skin. His hand lifted instinctively, then stopped inches from touching her. A question. Always a question. She looked at his hand, then at him. "May I?" he asked. "Yes." His fingers brushed the scar, gently, reverently, not pity, acknowledgement. "I cannot undo this," he said quietly. "No," she agreed. "But I can promise you something." She waited. "If ever you doubt yourself again, if that voice returns and tells you that your reality is false, you will come to me, and I will remind you who you are." Her breath faltered. "You cannot fight a voice inside my head." "No," he said, "but I can stand outside it." That was the moment. Not dramatic, not public, not thunderous, but something shifted. Not obsession, not rescue, protection. Chosen, measured, mutual. She stepped closer, not touching, but close enough that the space between them no longer felt like distance. "Then stand," she whispered. "I will," he said. Outside, frost clung to the rose stems. Inside, for the first time, Nell did not fear the coming night. But the ball was approaching, and London had no mercy for women who returned from the dead. The letter arrived in the late afternoon, sealed in Harrowfield wax. Nell recognized the crest before the footman even announced its origin. Her hand did not tremble as she broke it. That frightened her more than if it had. Inside, the handwriting was elegant, controlled, familiar. "My dear Petronella, how relieved I was to hear of your recovery. Imagine my distress upon learning that certain wild accusations have been circulating. You must understand that everything I did was for your protection. You were unwell. The doctors agreed. I acted only as any loving guardian would. I trust you will correct these misunderstandings before you ruin what remains of our family's dignity. With enduring affection, your devoted aunt, Moira Hadwell." The paper did not crumple in Nell's grip. She folded it once precisely. Then again. Roden watched her from across the library. "She calls it protection," Nell said evenly. "Yes." "She calls my imprisonment affection." His expression hardened. "She is afraid." "She should be." But something else lingered beneath Nell's composure. "A memory. Arthur was drowning in debt before my father died," she said slowly. "I overheard them once. They thought I did not hear. My trust dissolved at 25. If I married, the estate would transfer to my husband." Roden went very still. "She needed me declared unfit before then," Nell finished quietly. "Or dead." The room seemed to narrow around them. "You were 19, he said. "Yes." "And she forged grief for 6 years." Nell's gaze drifted to the fire. "She did not forge it," she murmured. "She performed it." Silence. Then, There is something you do not know, Roden said carefully. Her eyes lifted. I delayed the ball once already. You did? Yes. I received confirmation last week that Briarstone kept additional records. Payment ledgers, not merely bank drafts. And? The amounts increased over time. She understood instantly. She was paying to ensure I remained confined. Yes. Not merely a crime of opportunity, a sustained effort, a calculated erasure. Nell inhaled slowly. There were times, she said softly, when they moved me to a different room. When I became too articulate, too convincing. The doctor would adjust my dosage. Roden's hand tightened against the edge of the desk. You never told me that. You never asked. A beat passed. I'm asking now, he said quietly. She held his gaze. They gave me laudanum until I could not hold my thoughts long enough to argue. Then they wrote that my confusion proved their diagnosis. Roden looked away. For the first time since she had known him, he did not trust himself to speak. The fire snapped sharply in the grate. She paid for that, he said at last. Yes. She financed your silence. Yes. Something dark and controlled settled behind his eyes. I will not merely expose her, he said. I will dismantle every protection she has. Nell stepped closer. You must not become her in order to defeat her. That stopped him. His gaze returned to hers. I will not lock anyone away, he said carefully. I will use the law. Good. A faint pause. Roden, she added quietly.
Yes?
If I falter at the ball, if I freeze, you will not. If I do, he understood. I will not speak for you, he said, unless you ask. That mattered, more than vengeance, more than spectacle, choice. Always choice. Outside, the frost had begun to lift. Inside, the truth had grown heavier. Not merely betrayal, premeditation. And in London, Mrs. Hadwell began writing to allies. Quiet inquiries to sympathetic peers. Subtle warnings about the Duke's instability. Because she was not yet finished fighting, and the shadow of the asylum did not dissolve easily. The shadow reached London before she did. 2 days before the ball, a notice appeared in a minor society circular. A discreet paragraph, no accusation, only suggestion. It is whispered that a certain young lady, long believed deceased, has recently re-emerged under circumstances most irregular. Questions of health and propriety remain. Nell read it at breakfast. She did not flinch. She simply set the paper down. They are testing the ground, she said. Roden's jaw tightened. They hope to poison the narrative before you speak. She hopes, Nell corrected softly. He did not argue. By afternoon, 3 notes had arrived from titled acquaintances, each politely inquiring after her health. Not her comfort, not her safety. Her health. The word was surgical, precise, cruel. Nell folded each note neatly and placed them beside her plate. I should answer them, she said. You owe them nothing. I owe myself something. She rose. He watched her cross the room to the writing desk. Her back straight, her movement steady. She dipped the pen in ink and wrote, to those concerned, I assure you my mind is my own, my name is my own, and my liberty is no longer negotiable. Petronella, Duchess of Bowmont. She sanded the ink and sealed the letters herself. When she turned back toward him, something in her expression had sharpened. They will not define me again, she said. No, he agreed quietly, they will not. That evening, a visitor arrived unannounced. Lord Pennington, older, politically connected, polite enough to be dangerous. He bowed over Nell's hand. Your Grace, he said, voice smooth as polished marble. I wished only to offer support in what must be a delicate situation. Roden remained standing. Pennington continued, gaze shifting briefly to Nell. You must understand, of course, that public accusations of wrongful confinement require the utmost caution. Asylum superintendents are often respected men. A mistake here could damage reputations. Whose? Roden asked coolly. Pennington smiled faintly. Yours, hers. Society prefers its ghosts buried. The room cooled several degrees. Nell did not look at Roden. Then society must learn to tolerate resurrection, she said calmly. Pennington studied her more closely now, as if reassessing. You are certain, he pressed gently, that your recollections are entirely reliable? There it was, the blade beneath the silk. Nell felt it. The old doubt tried to stir, for one fleeting second. Then she heard Roden's voice in her memory. That is not madness, that is memory. She lifted her chin. I counted 2,244 days, she said evenly. Would you like me to recount them in detail, my lord? Pennington blinked, then smiled again, but less easily. I see, he murmured. Beaumont, you have chosen a formidable duchess. Yes, Roden replied, I have. Pennington took his leave. When the door closed, silence remained behind. Roden exhaled slowly. You did not need to endure that. Yes, she said, I did. He looked at her. She did not tremble, but he saw the strain in her shoulders. You do not have to be unbreakable, he said quietly. I am not unbreakable, she replied. A beat. I am choosing to stand. The difference mattered. He crossed the room slowly, not touching, but close. Tomorrow, he said, voice low. There will be no insinuations. No polite knives, only truth. She met his gaze. And if they do not believe it? Then they will fear it. That answer unsettled her slightly. Fear is a dangerous foundation, she said. So is silence. Outside, London prepared for spectacle. Inside, the air between them tightened, not from doubt, from the weight of what was coming. Because tomorrow, in a ballroom blazing with candlelight, her aunt would stand under 600 roses, and the past would no longer whisper. It would be named. The morning of the ball, Nell could not fasten the necklace. Her hands were steady enough for ledgers, steady enough for letters. But the clasp of the Beaumont diamond would not settle. She tried once, twice. The metal slipped. A soft knock. May I? Roden's voice. She hesitated only a fraction before answering. Yes. He entered slowly, as he always did, giving her time to refuse him if she wished. She stood before the mirror in midnight blue silk. The gown fit her perfectly. It did not hide her strength. It did not hide the faint scar at her wrist. It did not attempt to make her smaller. He stopped a respectful distance behind her. The clasp, she said quietly. He stepped closer, not touching her skin. Only the necklace. His fingers were warm against the cool chain as he fastened it. Neither spoke. In the mirror, their eyes met. You may still choose not to go, he said. She searched his reflection. Would you? If you asked? A beat. And if I asked you to abandon the entire spectacle? I would. No hesitation, no visible struggle. The certainty in his voice frightened her more than if he had argued. She turned to face him fully. Why? She demanded softly. Why would you dismantle everything you have prepared for years, for me? His expression shifted. Not anger, not frustration. Something more vulnerable. Because I will not use you as a weapon, he said. Even against those who deserve it. Silence pressed between them. The old poison stirred. He could still want the estate. He could still be performing. The servant's whispers returned unbidden. 8,000 a year. He has been after it since before she died. She stepped back. Just slightly, he noticed. His jaw tightened, not an accusation. In hurt. There it is, he said quietly. What? The doubt. She looked away. They trained me to doubt, she whispered. To question every kindness, to assume every gesture has a price. And you think I expect payment? I think, she said carefully, that you are powerful, and powerful men rarely act without motive. That landed, harder than any insult. He drew himself up, not looming but wounded pride sharpening his spine. You believe I rode through the night for an estate, he asked. I believe I do not yet know how to believe entirely, she replied. The honesty cut them both. For a long moment, neither moved. Then he stepped back, deliberately. Space. If you think I saved you for your fortune, he said evenly, I will sign every Ashcraft oft holding back into your sole control tonight. Before the ball, before the accusations, before the spectacle. Her breath caught. That is not what I meant. It is what you fear. He held her gaze. And I will not have you stand beside me tonight wondering whether you are loved or acquired. The room felt suddenly too small. Roden! I chose you when you owned nothing but a blank dance card, he said quietly. I chose you when I believed you were buried. I chose you when there was no estate to gain. His voice did not rise, but the restraint trembled beneath it. If you cannot yet trust that, he continued, then we should not stand before London as one. The words struck like cold water. He was not threatening. He was protecting. Even now, she saw it. The space he had given her since the beginning. The doors he never closed. The permission he never withheld. The choice he always returned to her hands. She stepped toward him, slowly. I do not doubt your love, she said. I doubt my ability to recognize it. That broke something open in him. The anger dissolved. Understanding replaced it. He reached for her, then stopped, question in his eyes. She answered by taking his hand first. I am learning, she whispered. Do not mistake that for rejection. His fingers closed around hers, not possessive, anchoring. You do not have to be certain tonight, he said softly. You only have to be willing. She nodded. Outside, carriages were already beginning to arrive in London. Inside, something far more fragile than reputation was being tested. Trust. And it was not yet finished breaking. Bowmont House blazed with candlelight. 600 flames shimmered in crystal chandeliers, casting fractured gold across silk gowns and polished marble. White roses climbed the columns. The orchestra tuned in low, expectant murmurs. London had come hungry for spectacle, hungry for scandal, hungry for blood. Roden stood at the head of the ballroom, immaculately composed in black. Beside him, slightly behind the silk screen, Nell waited. Her pulse was steady, not calm, steady. Once we step forward, he said quietly, there is no returning to obscurity. I do not want obscurity, she replied. He studied her profile. The lifted chin, the unwavering gaze. You are certain? No, she said honestly. But I am ready. That was enough. Mrs. Moira Hadwell was announced precisely at 9. She entered in deep violet satin, diamonds at her throat, grief long since converted into polished confidence. Arthur followed, already flushed with champagne. Moira's eyes swept the ballroom with satisfaction, then landed on Roden. He inclined his head courteously. Mrs. Hadwell. Your Grace, she returned smoothly. There was not a flicker of guilt in her expression. Only calculation. May I inquire as to the purpose of this grand gathering? She asked lightly. You may, he replied. He stepped onto the dais. The orchestra fell silent. Conversations dissolved into breathless anticipation. Ladies and gentlemen, Roden began, his voice carrying effortlessly across the vast room. You are here tonight because 6 years ago, a young woman was buried. A ripple. Moira's smile tightened. She was mourned, she was praised, she was forgotten. Nell felt her heartbeat in her throat. 3 months ago, Roden continued, I opened her grave. Gasps. It was empty. The words seemed to strike the chandeliers themselves. Moira laughed softly. My dear Duke, surely this is in poor taste. Be silent. The room froze. Roden did not raise his voice. He did not need to. She was not dead, he said. She was imprisoned, drugged, renamed, declared mad, confined for 6 years under false medical authority. Moira's composure flickered. Preposterous. Mrs. Moira Hadwell, he said evenly. You signed the commitment order. The silence became physical. Arthur stepped backward. Moira's eyes flashed. You have no proof. Roden extended his hand. Nell stepped forward from behind the screen. The ballroom inhaled as one. She stood beneath the roses. Alive, real, unmistakable. Color drained from Moira's face. No, she whispered. Nell did not look at Roden. She looked only at her aunt. You buried me in silk, she said calmly. You wept over roses my father planted. Moira's breath came sharp and shallow. You were unwell, she snapped. The doctor agreed. You were hysterical. My name, Nell said clearly, is Petronella Ashcraftoft. Her voice did not tremble. For 6 years I was told that was delusion. Tonight I say it where you cannot erase it. Murmurs swelled through the room. Roden opened the leather portfolio. Death certificate, asylum ledger, bank drafts, signatures, one by one. Each document read aloud with precise, merciless clarity. Moira's shoulders stiffened. Arthur turned as if calculating escape. 2 magistrate officers stepped discreetly inside the ballroom doors. Moira saw them. For the first time, fear. You cannot do this, she hissed. You will destroy the family name. You destroyed it, Nell replied softly. I am simply reclaiming it. Moira's gaze shifted to Roden. You would believe this girl over a respected physician? I believe my wife, he said. The word landed heavier than the accusations. Wife. The room absorbed it. Moira's lips parted. You married her? She whispered. Yes. The magistrates approached. Moira straightened desperately. You think society will accept her? She spat. After an asylum? After scandal? Nell lifted her chin. I do not require acceptance, she said. Only truth. The officers took Moira by the arm. Arthur began protesting incoherently. Crystals shattered somewhere in the chaos. But Nell did not move. Roden stepped beside her. Close. Not shielding. Not claiming. Standing. Moira was led toward the doors. You will regret this, she cried. No, Nell said quietly. I already did. The doors closed. The silence lingered. Not shock. Recognition. The past had been named. and it had not broken her. But as the murmurs rose and society began recalibrating itself around resurrection, Nell felt something shift inside her. This was not merely exposure. This was permanence. She had stepped into light. There would be no retreat, and beside her Roden waited, not to lead, but to see whether she would reach for him. No one moved. For 3 suspended heartbeats, 600 candles flickered in absolute silence. Then, Lady Penhurst, 73 years formidable and unbending, stepped forward from the crowd. She curtsied, deeply. "Your Grace," she said to Nell, her voice clear enough to carry to the farthest marble column. "Welcome back." It was not merely courtesy. It was alignment. The room shifted with her. One by one, silk rustled, gloves brushed marble, lords bowed, ladies curtsied, not to scandal, to survival. Nell held her spine straight. For 6 years she had been invisible. Tonight she was undeniable. Roden did not speak, he did not command the room. He watched her, watched the way she received each greeting with calm restraint, watched the strength in her gaze, watched London bend, slowly and almost reverently toward her. When the final curtsy was made and the orchestra resumed, softly at first, uncertain, the Duke leaned toward her. "Shall we?" he asked. She looked at the dance floor, at the sea of faces, at the roses. "Yes." He led her forward, not to the center but to the space that had opened naturally before them. The first notes of a waltz rose. He placed one hand at her waist, the other in hers. The contact was warm, steady, real. "You are trembling," he murmured. "So are you." A faint breath of something like laughter touched his mouth. "I am not accustomed to sharing the stage." "You are not on the stage," she replied quietly. "You built it." And then they moved. The dance was not dramatic, not theatrical. It was deliberate, measured steps across polished marble, her midnight blue silk gliding through candlelight, his black coat cutting a stark line beside her. They did not look at the crowd. They looked at each other. Halfway through the turn, she spoke softly. "You would have let me leave." "Yes." "Even after everything?" "Yes." She searched his eyes for hesitation. There was none. "You terrify me," she admitted. "Why?" "Because you would rather lose me than cage me." He did not smile. "That is the only kind of love I know how to offer." Something inside her, fragile and stubborn, finally settled. The music swelled. Around them, London recalculated its loyalties. The narrative had shifted. Not a hysterical girl. Ords, not a scandal. A duchess wronged. A crime exposed. A marriage chosen. When the waltz ended, applause followed. Polite at first, then stronger. Not for spectacle, for resolution. Later, long after the guests departed and Bowmont House grew quiet, Nell stood at the tall window of the Duke's study. The roses were still fragrant in the night air. Roden approached behind her. He did not touch her. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "No." She turned to face him. "There was a moment in that church when I thought I would run," she admitted. "Not from you, from certainty." "And now?" "Now I understand something." He waited. "They tried to bury me in doubt," she said. "They made me question my own name." Her gaze softened. "You did not argue me into believing again. You gave me the freedom to decide." He stepped closer, carefully. "And what have you decided?" She reached into the pocket of her gown, drew out a small worn card. Blank, the dance card from Almack's. She placed it against his chest. "You kept every line for me." "Yes." She lifted her chin. "Then fill them." His hand came to her waist. Slowly, reverently. "I intend to," he said. And in the quiet of the study, no orchestra, no audience, no spectacle, the Duke of Bowmont drew his wife into his arms and began a second dance. Not for society, not for revenge, for them, for the girl who had stood alone by a pillar, for the man who had opened an empty coffin, for the choice made freely. Outside, London would speak of that ballroom for decades. But inside Bowmont House, beneath fading candlelight and the lingering scent of roses, Petronella Ashcraftoft was no longer buried. She was loved.